Well, good morning, everybody. So good to be with you this morning and celebrate the most important event in all of human history, in my opinion, the resurrection of Jesus. And also, I'm so pumped that you're here to celebrate the hope that the resurrection brings to each and every one of us this morning. Oftentimes around Easter, I get sad. I'm disheartened by how so often Christians, we weaken and we water down what the resurrection actually means. I hear Christians so often talk about resurrection as just the exclamation mark at the end of Jesus' life, saying that it's sort of the proof that he was God. I often hear people talk about resurrection as just a cozy, nice devotional lesson for us about new beginnings and how we need to forgive others so that we win in the end. I also hear people talk about resurrection from time to time being a story about evacuation from this earth, talking about how broken and bad the earth is, but Jesus died and rose again to go to heaven, so we get to go to heaven too. You guys, I want us to lean into the reality that resurrection is so much more than that. It is bigger, it is more beautiful, it is more compelling, and it is more immediate than the ways that we often talk about resurrection. Resurrection is not just a trick at the end of Jesus' life to prove to us that he's God. It's actually the inauguration of God's final new creation and his kingdom, the up there coming down here on earth as it is in heaven. I love how Pastor John Mark Comer talks about this. He says this, that resurrection is the future world of God breaking into the present, where one dying world gives way to another that is coming to birth. In other ways, we can say this, that resurrection announces and proclaims that there is a new rule of life, and it is life itself, and that the rule of death is over, and it is passing away as we see it. Fear and greed and hate and violence and war and abuse and pride are not right, and they cannot last because they belong to death, and death no longer belongs here. Christians around the globe today are saying three words that are so powerful and theologically packed with truth. We say that he is risen. Christ is risen. It's interesting that we don't say that he has risen in the past tense, but we place it in the present tense because this is a true, powerful reality. That at this moment, Jesus is ruling and reigning the cosmos, that he is the risen, resurrected ruler of heaven and earth, because all authority on heaven and on earth has been given to him. And so followers of Jesus, we're called to be harbingers, we're called to be signposts of this new world that God is bringing, of hope and of light and of mercy and of justice. My friends, resurrection isn't just an escapism fantasy to abandon the physical earth and the hope that we someday get to go someplace else, go to heaven if we trust him. Resurrection is the restoration and the reclaiming of the physical earth and of things that we can see, touch, and feel. Put this way, that resurrection is God's declaration that he has not given up on this world, but he is renewing and restoring and reconciling all of creation. This is not just personal, but this is cosmic and this is communal, that God is saying he never gave up on this creation project, but he is renewing it and he is restoring it. And Easter announces that this is God's good world and he's still in the game to bring it back to himself. This tells us that your blood, your sweat, your taste, art, sex, community, music, and our physical bodies are good, and they will go on in God's new world. We know this because one of the very first accounts of Jesus after his resurrection is that he's meeting some of his friends on the beach for breakfast, and they're eating fish for breakfast. I imagine it's a fish taco with a nice mango salsa. Sounds good. Maybe I'm just really hungry for lunch. Maybe that's it. But Jesus could say, no, we're done with this food stuff now. I'm a resurrected body. I'm just basically like a ghost angel kind of thing. But no, he wants to eat and feast. And he announces that this physical world, God is restoring it and redeeming it and resurrecting it right as he sees it. His resurrection body says that your body is good and this world matters. And resurrection, you guys, isn't a cozy, sentimental, theological, devotional lesson about forgiveness and new beginnings. I love how evangelist from the 20th century, British evangelist Leonard Ravenhill says this about Christianity. He says, Christianity is not about God making bad people good or good people better, but it's about God making dead people come alive. This is the business of resurrection. This is the resurrection agenda, is to bring life from dead people, to bring dead people back to life. Hear me, my friends. If you came to church today, Easter 2026, the 11:30 service, and you thought you were just going to get a little self-improvement, to feel a little bit better about yourself, a little bit more courage to go out into the crazy world, like, trust me, if your thing is just about getting a little bit better, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because Jesus of Nazareth isn't in the self-improvement, behavior modification business. He's in the resurrection business. He wants to flood your dark places with his light, the light of life. And speaking of dark places, the very first followers of Jesus, early on that Sunday morning, that Easter Sunday, they were in a dark place. I mean, just imagine these are men and women that left everything behind because they thought that Jesus was the one. And they had their hopes dashed, their dreams dashed. They were disillusioned. We thought he was different from all the other wannabe messiahs, but he died just like they did as well. They were so despondent because they saw their leader, their friend, their rabbi, their Lord, who was brutally murdered in a torturous capital punishment, where you had the Roman authorities and the Jewish leaders getting together to take him out. They were traumatized by what they witnessed. And it's in their darkness and in their desolation where resurrection actually takes root. John, one of the eyewitnesses of all of these accounts of Jesus and one of the authors of the Gospels, tells us this in John chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Notice, she's not expecting a resurrection. Nobody expected there to be no body in that tomb. She thinks that somebody robbed the tomb and they took the body of Jesus, and so she's despondent. A few verses later, we're told this. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" Side note for all the men in the room, this question does not work. Do not try this question at home. Woman, why are you crying? Not good. The angels ask it. She responds in her sadness again. "They've taken my Lord," it gets personal, "my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." Again, not expecting a resurrection, thinking that this is ball game over and somebody stole his body. Then a few verses later, we're shown that Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, is actually in the tomb with them. And what happens next surprised Mary to no end. Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, her mother tongue, Rabboni, which means teacher. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Now, I want to go back to the very beginning of John's resurrection narrative here, because there's something that I saw in this first verse that my whole life growing up in church and 18 years in doing ministry, I never saw this before. And there's something that John says in the setting of this passage that changed everything for me. It brought Easter into a new light. It brought myself into a new light. It brought the character of God into a new light. And I hope that maybe for you, Easter 2026, it does the same. John tells us at the beginning of this resurrection narrative, John chapter 20, verse 1, early on the first day of the week, that would be Sunday, the very first day of the week, early in the morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. John goes out of his way to tell us that it was early in the morning and it was still dark outside that Mary went and she saw that the stone had been rolled away and that Jesus' body wasn't there, that there had been a resurrection already while it was still dark outside. Now, this is fascinating to me, and this is compelling to me, because everything about Easter in the way that we celebrate it in the West today has nothing to do with darkness. It's all about sunshine. It's all about rainbows. It's all about bubbles. It's all about, hiding eggs or coloring eggs, or everybody wearing their beautiful pastel colors that I never see any other Sunday. It's about sunrise services in the very early mornings there you bribe people with pancake breakfasts. That would totally work for my kids. It's the only way that ever happened. But it's all about the sunshine and 77 and sunny. It's all about weather that's not like in Indiana this weekend, right? That's what we think of when we think about Easter. It's all sunrise. It's all sunshine. But John specifically tells us that the stone had been rolled away and the tomb was empty and Jesus was resurrected while it was still dark. In other words, before the sun rose, the sun had risen, y'all. And nobody saw this coming, but resurrection happens while it was still dark. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the Son of God had risen. Resurrection always happens while it's dark. And I don't think this is just a throwaway detail that John is telling us. I think John is onto something. He wants us to pick up the breadcrumbs of something beautiful and powerful and transformative for us. You see, John, the author of this gospel, also penned the book of Revelation. He penned multiple epistles or letters in the New Testament. But John is a master storyteller. I like to liken him to a composer or someone who composed the music for a musical where there are different themes and motifs that he plays with. And he'll place these motifs in different places throughout the story to add color and to bring emotion and to bring clarity to character development. John loves to do this in his gospel, the telling of Jesus' life. And one of the motifs, one of the themes that John plays with is light and darkness. He does it all the time, light and darkness. He does it at the very beginning of his gospel as he sort of gives his version of the Christmas story through a poem. He says this: in him, in Jesus, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Light and darkness. We see in just a few chapters before the resurrection, when Jesus is having the Last Supper with his disciples, and he's betrayed by one of his friends, Judas, for 30 pieces of silver, we're shown this. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. And I don't think that John is just giving us a chronological detail about the weather outside and where the sun was. I think John is playing off of this theme, this motif of light and darkness, and he says that when Jesus was betrayed, it was dark, and it was darkness winning that moment. And here we are again at the resurrection narrative early on the first day of the week. While it was still dark, Jesus had risen from the dead. And here's the big idea that I want you to gaze at this morning, that I want you to take in and consider, that I want you to be compelled by this morning and wrestle to the ground when you consider the implications for your own life. Resurrection always happens while it's still dark. Resurrection only happens while it's still dark. This is God's calling card. Resurrection always happens while it's dark. I've come to believe that God loves working in the dark. It is his preferred light setting is as dim as possible. This is what God not only did at the resurrection, this is what God has always been up to. You follow around the stories of the Hebrew scriptures or our Old Testament, and God's people, the Israelites, they're being enslaved by the Egyptian empire under the thumb of the evil Pharaoh. See, for 400 years, they're in slavery. But God sets them free and gives them an exodus on Passover evening where they escape their captors, their slave owners, by the cover of night, because God resurrects things and brings healing and hope when it's dark. There's a great man of God in the Hebrew scriptures, a prophet by the name of Elijah. And Elijah was known for his mighty acts and his bravery and speaking truth to power. But there's a time that even Elijah is running for his life because the authorities want him dead. And he finds himself running for his life, hiding in a cave in the shadow of a mountain. And he thinks it's all over and he wants his whole life to end. He just wants to be done living. But God speaks to him in a still small voice and reminds them that he is with him still. Another prophet in the Old Testament, a guy by the name of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah had the rough task of preaching this message, giving this message to God's people. The Babylonians are going to ransack Jerusalem, and you are going to lose your homeland, and things are going to get worse for a long time before they get better. And Jeremiah has this privilege of bringing this happy-go-lucky, shiny message, not so much. He's known as the weeping prophet. He actually writes his big work, the prophecy of Jeremiah, but then also 5 chapters of Hebrew poetry in your Old Testament called Lamentations. You know you've got it bad when you write a book of the Bible called Lamentations. I mean, that's Taylor Swift's next album title probably, right? I mean, things are low. But it's in Lamentations chapter 3, in the darkness of the loss and the desolation, where Jeremiah pens these words that God's mercies are new every morning. And he sees a new revelation of who God is. And he learns that God always works in the dark. I imagine in a room this size with as many people that are here and all the stories that we represent, that some of us this morning are experiencing darkness. Some of us are feeling it in a real and visceral way. We experience darkness in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's in our relationship world, our relational world, right? Where maybe for you, you're in a season of singleness, and it's been for a really long time, and you feel so lonely. Or maybe it's singleness that you never chose, but it's from a detonation of a relationship, and you find yourself alone. Maybe for you, it's relationship darkness in your marriage, to where you and your partner are anything but partners right now, and you're just moving apart from each other, and you feel isolation, and you feel like something is off. Maybe for you, it's financial darkness, where the money that is owed, it keeps rising, and there's not more days in the month, and you don't know how to turn this around, but it's almost suffocating to you, where you don't know how to take the next step. Maybe for you, it's health darkness, where you know something's going on with you, but you don't want to say it out loud because that feels like you're speaking it into the universe and existence. Or maybe it's the health of somebody else that you love, and you have all the existential questions, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you feel so out of control, it just feels like darkness. Maybe for you, it's mental health darkness, where it feels like your head is just spinning and there's just a cloud of uncertainty over you, and the whirring of anxiety of what could go wrong. Or maybe it's just the gray cloud of depression, to where you don't even enjoy the things that you used to enjoy, and you're just not right mentally. Or maybe for you, you can be like me sometimes, where I feel like current events darkness. I feel like every time that my phone buzzes and there's a new headline come across my screen, my blood pressure rises, or I just kind of want to give up from the weight of it all. Or it seems like every time we turn on a screen or hear anything from the news, it just feels more of the same story of might equals right, and the vulnerable being crushed and punished, where injustices and wars just recycle every 15 to 20 years, and violence seems to be the only tool that our leaders know how to use to get the job done. And you just see more and more damage and more brokenness, where you're sometimes wondering, God, where are you in this darkness? How much lower can we go? Now, whatever you're feeling, whatever darkness you find yourself in this morning, I don't want you to just see the mess and put some newspaper over it and act like it's not there, but I want you to bring it with you. But I want to counteract that with another reality that's true, that you might not have considered yet. It's this, that if you're experiencing darkness, you are a prime candidate to experience resurrection. If you are experiencing darkness, you are a prime candidate for the resurrection power of God to take root in your life. If you're depressed and anxious, know that God works in the dark. If all hell is breaking loose in your job and your career and you don't know what your future holds, know that God works in the dark. If your marriage is on the rocks, if your kids are moving away from you in the relational closeness, know that God works in the dark. It's what he does. It's what he did. It's what he'll always do. And for me personally, there's been so many times in my life where this has not been a theory. This has been lived experience for me when I've been in darkness. God brings light and resurrection from these situations. A little over 6 years ago, my wife and I and some close friends, we had this crazy idea to start a new church. called Bridgeway. Have you heard of it? Bridgeway, have you heard of this place? Yeah. It was a little over 6 years ago, and we had this dream to start this new church in our town, and we went on this journey inviting anybody and everybody to come consider to be a part of a new church, a different kind of church, to reach people. And we had our grand opening on March 8th of 2020, and it was incredible. Like, we ran out of chairs. People were getting baptized. People were coming to church for the first time in 20, 30, 40 years. People were serving. It was this beautiful thing. And it was 4 days later that I was in the tech booth of our first leased space across the street over there on Elizabeth Street. I'm putting in the slides for my second message ever at Bridgeway, and my phone starts blowing up with my pastor friends, my ministry friends asking me, hey, what are you guys going to do about the coronavirus on Sunday? And my first thought was literally this: what's that beer from Mexico have to do with church on Sunday? Like, what are we talking about here, right? But as things got more and more real, and the NCAA shut down March Madness, and the NBA season got canceled, and we were home bleaching our Amazon packages, I would love to tell you that in those moments where darkness was shrouding over everything, that I was full of faith, and I thought this is going to give us muscle we didn't even know we needed, and God's going to use this to do even better things than you could have ever dreamed. I wish I could tell you that, but true confessions. I just went home a few minutes later, and I got in the shower and turned on the hot water until all the hot water was gone because I was crying my eyes out. And I wondered, what the heck did I just do with my savings? What the heck did I just do with all these people that gave so sacrificially to this? What are we doing? And to be real with you, it took me a few days to get out of bed. I was so depressed. I was just so despondent about it all. But when I did get just enough strength to take that first step out of my bed and back to work, I think God started to do something in me through that dark season. I mean, God used that season where we were only, doing a service online, and we couldn't meet with each other, and we couldn't do the standard church thing. God broke something in me that needed to be broken. And he forged something in me that needed to be forged that reminded me of what church really is. And it was during the darkness of that season that I was reminded that church is not about karaoke Jesus music and a half-decent TED Talk with Bible verses. Like, that's not what church is. Church is a community on mission to bring blessing and to bring God's kingdom to bear in our world. And so that was broken in me, and it actually forged the kind of church that we are here at Bridgeway. Not about services and shows and programs, but about people and about being a blessing. And years later, you guys, I am so grateful for what God did in that darkness. As hard as it was in the moment, God transforms our darkness. He does something through that darkness that he could only do with resurrection power. I'm grateful for it. Maybe you have a story like that as well. Don't ever trust somebody on a stage at church with a microphone who tells you if you say yes to Jesus, you won't experience any darkness. There's no guarantee of that, my friends. Actually, we're guaranteed the opposite. We're guaranteed that we will experience trouble. We will experience darkness. But here's the truth that you can count on it. You can take it to the bank, that in your darkness, you will never be alone. And as you go through the dark valleys of life, it will be transformed, and you will be better and stronger and have a new resurrected outlook on everything. During World War II, Nazi Germany had arrested and basically captured millions and millions of Jews in Eastern Europe. And talk about darkness. They were probably the center of darkness, where these people, these precious people, were held captive in what we call now concentration camps, where people were starved to death, where they were brutalized, where they were dehumanized, and where many of them were exterminated like vermin. And it's in this place, you talk about hell on earth, you talk about the darkest locations on earth, that still some of these beautiful people experience the power of God in their darkness. In Cologne, Germany, in one of these concentration camps in Cologne, we see on the walls of one of the cells of this concentration camp these words inscribed. Someone wrote, "I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. And I believe in love, even when there's no one there. And I believe in God, even when he is silent." We will experience darkness, but the resurrection power of Jesus is the kind of thing that gives us this angle and this lens to see that we're never alone, because God always works in the dark. Back to our text, John 21 tells us this. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and she saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. And just a few verses later, we're told that now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. Why is she weeping? Why is she crying hysterically? Because all of her hopes and dreams had been dashed and destroyed. Jesus wasn't who she thought he was. He didn't act and perform the way that she assumed he would because he was supposed to bring victory, but this just looks like defeat. And so she's weeping and she is crying. But something that I find to be so powerful and compelling about Mary is that even when it's dark and even when it's the darkest, she moves towards Jesus. She moves in the direction of Jesus. I don't know about you, but for me, man, so often when I experience darkness, I want to move any other direction than Jesus. Like it feels so unnatural for me sometimes to move towards Jesus when I'm experiencing darkness. Oftentimes I move in the direction of distraction, anything to make me not feel the pain that I'm feeling, where I'm doom scrolling on my phone, or I'm on social media, or I'm binging a TV show, or I'm playing video games. Like maybe you move in that direction. Maybe for you, it's the direction of addiction, which all addiction is trying to do something to escape the pain and the disconnection that we are feeling. And maybe for you, it's overeating or overdrinking or medicating. Others of us, we move in the direction of overactivity, and this is a sneaky one, but it's very, very common. Overactivity, where we want to fill every box in our calendar so that we feel important, so that we don't have time to slow down and actually reckon with the darkness that we are experiencing. And a special word to those of us that are church people. One of the easiest places for us to hide from God is in religious activity. And we can fill our calendars with a bunch of church stuff and miss God altogether. But you and I, we get so distracted in all these different directions that we go into. But what Mary understands and what Mary wants us to understand and what she experiences in a real and visceral way is this: that darkness is the best setting for God's deepest revelations. In other words, there are some lessons you can only learn if you're in the dark. The prophet Isaiah, speaking for God in Isaiah 45, speaks about the gift of darkness. He says, and I will give you treasures hidden in the darkness, secret riches. I will do this so you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, the one who calls you by name. Isaiah seems to say that there's a gift in darkness. It actually helps us see and experience God in a new way. And again, some of you, maybe not all of us, but some of you, you understand this. You've experienced this not just in your head, but in your bones, that there are some lessons you can only learn in the dark. When you lost that job you thought you might be in forever, when you were struggling with a health diagnosis or the waiting period, where you needed God to show up in a new way, the darkness actually allowed you to zero in and actually hear from him and actually see him without the distractions around you speaking. So Mary moves towards Jesus even in the darkness. Don't miss this, guys. Resurrection always happens while it's still dark. God loves to work in your darkness. And when you move towards Jesus in the dark, he teaches us, he shows us lessons we can never learn in the light. So Mary finds herself despondent outside of the tomb. She has this interaction with the two angels and it just makes things worse. And then she hears this voice. Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, is there and says to her, Mary, in her mother tongue, in the way she heard it from his lips countless times. The resurrected Jesus says, Mary. This is so powerful, you guys. This is so powerful because Mary, of all people, had been shrouded by darkness and she had a dark past. Church tradition teaches that she is the sinful, unnamed prostitute in the Gospels before she met Jesus. And maybe that's not true, but the Gospels do explicitly tell us that she was possessed by 7 unclean spirits, which is a Jewish way of saying she was fully possessed by darkness and by oppression. She had deeply harmed herself. I'm sure she had deeply harmed other people. But Jesus still calls her by name. Despite all of her baggage, he knows her by name and he calls her by name. And her mess is not too big for God's mercy. Listen, my friends, this Easter, Jesus knows all your baggage too, and he still calls you by name. The resurrected Jesus sees all of your darkness and he still calls you by name. He knows your secrets. He knows your addictions, all your failures, your hidden true self, your hangups, your hurts, your pain, your sorrows, your mess. He doesn't think that your mess is too big for him. He still calls you by name with forgiveness in his eyes and a new beginning on the horizon. This Easter, he calls you by name. Now, it'd be a really, really cool thing, and you'd feel pretty cool about yourself if you met somebody that you saw as an authority or somebody you thought was important, and you met them, and a few days later, they call you again, and they remember your name, or they run into you and they remember your name. Like, think of this, if you had met the president or Oprah Winfrey, or actually that's a really lame example. If you met Pedro Pascal or Beyonce or Peyton Manning, and like a few days later you get a call and they're like asking for you and they remember you, or they shoot you a text and they remember your name and your interaction, you'd be feeling pretty good about yourself, right? Because when they remember who you are and you see them as a person of esteem, it makes all the difference. Hear me, my friends. The federal government here in the United States of America knows you by your social security number. The state of Indiana knows you by your driver's license number. Your insurance company knows you by your policy number. Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime know you by your email username and password. And God knows that Amazon knows you by your credit card number. But here's the powerful truth, you guys. This Easter is that in your darkness, Jesus knows you and calls you by name. The question isn't, does Jesus know you? And does he call you by name? That's not the question. The compelling question that you need to wrestle to the ground this year is not, does he know you and does he call you by name, but do you know his voice? Are you listening to his voice? Are you trusting the good shepherd as he calls you forward? The question isn't, does he know your name? He does. He knows everything about you, and he still receives you with mercy and grace and love. The question is, do you know his voice, and are you trusting it? And as we close today, I want to set the stage for you to have a moment, maybe to hear his voice. Maybe to, in the darkness, to shut out the other noise and just hear his voice afresh, anew, or maybe for the very first time. I want to invite you, wherever you are, just to close your eyes this morning. Remember, my friends, if you are feeling like you're in the dark, you are in prime real estate for resurrection. Like a seed in the darkness. That's where the roots of resurrection and new life takes hold. He is the light in your darkness, and the darkness bows to him. The resurrected Jesus knows you by name, and he calls you by name. He whispers to you, I am with you, I am for you, and I am the light of life. Come and follow me and trust me. If you're here this morning and you feel like you're under fire, I want you to trust that you are in the perfect situation for resurrection. When you feel like your mind and your emotions are trapped in defeat, if you feel like your heart is under attack, the resurrected Jesus whispers to you, this is not the end of your story. I will be your peace, your shalom, your wholeness. Jesus says, trust me, my child. This dark season of feeling in the fire, that fire will be extinguished by my living water. And if you're here this Easter and you feel like you're in the middle of a storm, I want you to trust that you are in the bullseye of God's resurrection strategy. When you feel like you're swirling in chaos, where you can't see 3 feet in front of you from the squalls of wind and rain, when all life feels out of control, the mysterious presence of resurrection proclaims, I am in the boat with you, in the storm with you. And he whispers, I will be the calm in your storm, and I will be the one to hold back the seas. I'm with you in the dark, under fire, or in the storm.